Thank you very much, Lindsay. It's wonderful to be here with my left-hand lady, who's going to help me. And the reason she's here, and it takes two, is because I had really hoped that the report would be published by now, and that we could talk about what it says and how we've used evidence to help us say the things that we hope will make sense to you. But sadly, it's not clear because guess what? They're checking the data, and so they should, because there's a lot depending on us getting that right. So thank you very much. Anyway, so we're having a quick shift of script, as it were, as I talk to you, and I depend on Fiona to kind of gear you into the right slides. I'm delighted to be here for the personal reasons as much as anything else. In my day, they didn't call us access students. We were just bright wee things from poor backgrounds who deserved a chance. And actually, what's been lovely coming back to Scotland to do this is that spirit is still alive and well. The education of the poor, I think, it's just in the ether here. And that's fabulous, and it's difficult as well. Because sitting around my table of 12 good people are people with, again, a personal experience of making that journey through worlds they were not expected to be in. And I start by saying that because it's the main reason why I've been grateful for data, because it's very emotional. And actually, unless you have data to challenge this, when you see and experience the levels of poverty in some of our communities, it's very hard to stay thinking. And we've had wonderful, wonderful visits to nurseries where they are taking babies to university so that they can see what a university is. So there's lots of emotive stuff in Scotland around this. And when in doubt, return to remit with numbers at our fingertips has really been my kind of rule around the Commission. So in absence of the report, let me just tell you a bit about what we've been doing, how we've been doing it, and the indications we have of places of leverage for change. We are nearly at the halfway mark of this report, halfway mark of our existence. And the next phase is where, and I'm describing it as, we move from a call for evidence to a call for judgment. So this is quite a key point for us in our work. It's also 18 years since the Deering report in England, and it's 18 years to the child born today will be presenting as an applicant, a child born today in difficult circumstance, will be presenting as an applicant to universities. So we have 18 years to dismantle every barrier we encounter, and of course the barriers start at their birth. So the origins of this commission is the First Minister's ambition that a child born today in Scotland's poorest communities will have equal chance of getting into universities, all universities, in the country as children born in the best circumstances. It's a pretty honourable task chairing this commission, and I think we all feel the responsibility of that quite acutely. So very quickly, because I have only a very short time, that's another cruelty. I wanted the cruelty, the report isn't ready, the cruelty is just a short time. So let me say a couple of things. I wonder if you could just treat me then as your trailer for the report to come out, a reader's guide to help you make your way through it, because it's rather large, it's larger than we wanted. Okay, so I've insisted since the beginning that the Commission meets under Lord Nolan's principles of public life, because the assertion of a moral governance around our work feels important to me for all sorts of debates around at the moment. We also have our own philosophy. We worked hard at saying, well, actually, we know the philosophy of the First Minister, but what do we think as a group of experts around this table? And the values that we hold to in the Commission in our work is we actually, as a whole Commission, endorse equality as the value that guides us when in doubt. Inclusion is an imperative. Excellence for all. So no more widening participation into further failure, which is what's happened in some occasions. And of course, working with one another with integrity. 4 areas in our remit. We are asked to bring the evidence together, synthesize the evidence that's around on barriers to access, because there's so many diverse perspectives on that. And that's what our analysts have been working to do. To look at then the solutions to some of those barriers so that we can dismantle them. And that's the strategy, it's dismantling barriers. not that more than anything else, actually, because there's other work going on. And that also we are asked to look at data systems to see how suitable they are for monitoring progress and to set milestones. Now, it's 18 years, and that's quite a long perspective for us. So we believe that, widening access is about fairness, not about social engineering. We've had accusations of that. We think it's a social good, an economic good, and it is compatible, and the evidence from America is quite clear about this. It is compatible with academic excellence. There's lots of tensions we've encountered, and that, I think, has been the strongest one. We set our stall out by saying inequality in higher education is unfair, it is damaging to everybody, it's unsustainable, and it is unacceptable in this day and age. And Scotland has a moral, social, and economic duty to fix it. As we start, let me locate this commission alongside a suite of strategies that I think is the government's meta-policy on attacking poverty. And we do stand absolutely side by side with all the work in early years. In fact, we've had discussions of saying, let's give all the money to early years and then there'll be no difficulty, if only. Because when you see babies in their early years with difficulty, they have real difficulties at the age of 3 in terms of learning. We stand absolutely side by side with the work on attainment and completely absolutely by the work on vocational education and training, the restructuring of that, you know, the employability of young people. You'll know the money that's invested in Scotland in young people who come to university, and actually that's an imbalance with the other young people who don't. So we're absolutely side by side holding on and wanting the same thing as them. Our approach has been we asked for a call for evidence, and that call for evidence will be published with our report. So you can see what the world was telling us as we went about our task. We commissioned a literature review. We have had themed meetings, very intense days on early years, on young people with care, because they're in our scope. We've had visits in to us from all sorts of colleagues, you know, diligent, deeply concerned colleagues, and meetings out. We've been scooting around Scotland like there was no tomorrow, actually seeing lovely examples of the slice of the system as a whole, from early years through schools, primary and secondary, through colleges, through universities, and into employment. And that exists already in Scotland, as well as seeing very good initiatives and so on. So we're seeing all sorts of stages of development. And of course, you may know that I've been claiming that Scotland is ready for the next generation of access work. It's been doing this for 10 years. It's 10 years since the last review on widening access by the Skills Funding Council. And actually, I have very good reasons to be optimistic. So constant dialogues have taken place, and I conducted an appreciative inquiry. You know, there's enough telling people off, and we wanted to see actually what's working and what can we move into a systemic approach. That's been with practitioners. I'm very excited by the practice I see in the institutions further down the line. And by the line, I mean the people who are actually working with the learners. There's been 10 years of prototyping in Scotland through funded initiatives, and they're a bit initiative dependent, of actually how to do this at all levels. And so there's a dowry there. There's a real dowry of how do you tackle all this. The bad news is it's not all in the same place and not all happening at the same time. So one of the challenges, and actually it's under-researched and under-evaluated, but it's there. And some of it is on the verge of being a wee bit tired. So this is a very good time to bring some lenses on impact on some of those. We've been with the professionals, we've been with policy folks as well, and of course we've been with some political colleagues. Our task was simple: to know more, to understand more, to analyse data, and to spot the possibilities for growth for the next generation. So 18 years from Deering and 18 years before the children we're talking about are born. We have things to do with the others in the meantime. I would like to move to some of the slides. Let me just try and connect with you. So I'm on the barriers of access, actually. So let me tell you what's talking to us from the examination so far. The evidence shows us, and it's evidence-based, that the early years attainment gap is growing, and it's worrying. So you'll see what that means. There is a school attainment gap. There's lots of denial about that in some places, and aspirations are low from some of the interviews that took place. There is a lack of parental experience of HE, actually lots of education, sometimes secondary, in some of the people we are concerned about. And the lack of quality advice and guidance in schools and from people in and around the families is actually, I think, rather concerning. Secondary school subject choice, including clear advice and guidance on the consequence of decisions, is lacking. The days of career teachers who could keep up to date with the changing requirements of universities have long gone. And that is a real concern. I know that's being looked at, but it's a real concern. And the lack of quality advice and guidance on student finance is also worrying. The cultural barriers to retention, I think it too needs attention. It's surprising how many young people just think university isn't for me, and I would fit in there. And we encountered people who'd come to university and started and left. They couldn't handle it. Some of them, luckily, were able to go back to the college of further education that they came from. And through the very good work of the Open University in Scotland, were able to stay attached to university life, but from a distance that was safe for them. So, and again, there's initiatives that show us how you can minimise the impact of that, but it is quite worrying, and some of these were older learners as well. And admissions. The mechanics of admissions really need further attention, and my hope is that we will be doing that, so just to say that to you. So, the challenge for Scotland, I think, moves something like this. The deficit has been located in the individual so far, as much as I can see, rather than in the institutions and their behaviours. And that's a strategic swerve that I think needs to happen. The 10 years of prototyping is initiative dependent and incentive dependent. And actually that you know the circumstances we live in. That too needs to be examined. And that really is about how do you internalise and take into the interior strategies and being of university life, that actually these are all our people. So I think it's no longer on the fringe, if I dare say that in Edinburgh, but actually this becomes a real matter. And you know why that is. Poverty and exclusion shames us all. And, enough. Their lives are difficult enough. And they're the ones carrying the shame. They feel ashamed. And their shame is much more ours than it is theirs. Anyway, there's lack of evidence on the types of access programs that have most impact. So there's lots of dedicated, passionate people out there doing wonderful things that help individuals, but actually, does it take them far enough? Does it deal enough with the gaps we're not sure about? The need to expand and maximise some of the more hopeful pieces of work around encouraging. There's contextual admissions, and you'll know about that here. Part of the lead in Scotland, and actually in the UK was from here. That shows us great promise. The articulation pathways. I mean, colleges, Scotland's colleges are a credit to them. They are making their targets on equality, and they have ways of being with people. But the articulation pathway needs further work. I've been asking people as I've gone round to the institutions, what's your heart's desire from the Commission? And an articulation map has been asked for by employers, by principals of universities, by principals of colleges, and by the Careers Service. So that seems to me to be something that has won people's approval, again, under researched, under evaluated, under worked, I think, for the possibility of its future. Admissions processes being changed to place more value and what people from disadvantaged backgrounds bring. Again, we look to America, who have shown us the way, it's very, very exciting approaches to admissions. Data is not used consistently in any of the places we've been to, and that needs to be tackled as well. And the need for better data support targets and monitor progress is really quite palpable. Let me end by talking a bit about some tensions. There's something about this undermining of academic excellence. It's a hard argument to win because, of course, the catch-up required is quite difficult. So there's something about that. The use of 4-year degrees, for example, what people are doing with advanced hires. There's areas of flexibility that I think we need to look at further, and we haven't started that work yet. I'll say a bit more about what we're going to do next. Finite university places, well, you know, we're in the world we're in, but I think it brings its own difficulties. And we can talk about that in other places. But this focus, people telling me continually, well, it's just the attainment gap. It's not just the attainment gap. If a school, we came across some young people in schools next door to one another, and the decision of one head teacher to say, you're not doing work experience, you'll do another hire, and the one next door doing work experience, changed the fortunes of their applications. So there's something about leadership being aware of actually not being hubristic in their own institutions, but being part of a stronger collective and a move for change. So let me just say a bit now about the next phase. And I'm really, really sad not to have the report here, but I promised Lindsay I'll get him a copy as soon as we can. We move now into this move to this call for judgment. We are setting up, and I have learned as a college principal, and somebody who's worked in policy as well, there does come a time with evidence when you have to put it to judgment. So this move from a call for evidence to a call for judgment in relation to policy means that we are now going back out to two main groups. And some people, somebody here people here have been invited to join those groups. We're calling them think-ins, expert groups on a series of topics. But we're going back to the people that we want to talk to most at this stage, which are the young people and their learners. They're the ones most disadvantaged. In 10 years, the change, I think, in Scotland's performance, I better watch how I say this. If I have the slide with me, I don't. But the change is very small indeed. 10 years on, it's 3%, just more or less 3%. That's 10 years movement in bridging that gap. And actually, we have to do better than that. So we're going to talk to learners, we're going to talk to their parents, their teachers and advisors, and we're going to do a wonderful exercise in practice, I hope, when evidence and experience talk to one another that gives us intelligence for the future and that really will have impact. Now, the length of this commission is very short indeed. I worked on Dearing and it was 3 years, and we have 10 months. And you'll know why that is. We have a very ambitious government in Scotland, and they're in a hurry to change the world. But poverty in Scotland is not just widening difficulties, it's deepening at quite a frightening rate. So the time for intervention is as soon as possible. And we're hoping that when we finish this Commission's work, people will have a blueprint for fairness, at least for the groups we're concerned with. So, thank you. Wish I could say more, but that's what I can say. Okay? I'm sorry, was that difficult?